Here is a summary of the story, Going Places by A.R. Barton. Sophie and Jancy were walking home from school one day. Sophie told Jancy how she planned to open a boutique after finishing school. Jancy shared her doubts, telling Sophie that her dream would take a lot of money. However, Sophie was determined and declared that she would first start as a boutique manager, earning enough to open her own boutique. Jancy, knowing that they would be eventually working at a biscuit factory, felt sad for her friend. She further added that Sophie's father wouldn't allow her to work at a shop. Sophie ignored this, and as she entered her house, she thought out aloud how she would buy a boutique if she ever got any money by chance. Her daydream was rudely interrupted by her father, who told her that she should buy the family a decent home with her money. Derek, her little brother, reminded her that money didn't grow on trees. In the background, Sophie's mother sighed at her daughter's dreams. Sophie felt stifled by the atmosphere and left looking for her older brother, Jeff. Jeff was repairing a motorcycle part. He was an apprentice mechanic who traveled far each day to work. A quiet and reserved person, his silence made him seem distant from those around him. This fascinated Sophie as she had never been away from home. She wished that her brother would someday take her with him. Though she knew that Jeff and her father would not approve, she imagined herself riding behind Jeff as the world looked on and applauded. To attract his attention, Sophie told Jeff about her meeting with Danny Casey, a football player he admired. She claimed that he had spoken to her and looked at her with his soft green eyes. This caught Jeff by surprise, and he initially refused to believe her. Jeff's doubt hurt Sophie as he was always the first person to know her secrets. Jeff described Sophie's meeting with Casey to their father. Unimpressed, their father asked Sophie to quit telling her wild stories and warned her that she would get into trouble. Sophie, however, felt that Jeff did believe her. Later, Sophie decided to share another secret with her brother. She told him how Casey had agreed to meet her a second time to give her an autograph. Jeff pretended to believe her. However, he decided to take this news with a pinch of salt. That Saturday, the entire family, except Sophie's mother, went to the stadium to watch a football match. Seeing Casey score, Sophie felt a personal sense of pride, while Jeff and her father were happy that their team had won. The next week, Jancy surprised Sophie by asking her about Casey. Sophie felt betrayed by Jeff and was angry because Jancy was known to be a gossip. However, as Jancy kept talking, Sophie realized that Jeff had only mentioned her first meeting with Casey and not the second one. That night, Sophie waited for Casey at a spot where lovers usually met. As she waited, she began to imagine the excitement she would feel when Casey walked towards her. However, as time went by and the football player did not show up, Sophie began to wrestle with her thoughts. She now started imagining how she would feel if Casey did not turn up. She imagined her sadness and Jeff's anger and disappointment. She fantasized how she would live bravely, even when everyone doubted her. After a long wait, she decided to return home. On her way, she crossed the arcade and replayed her fantasy in her mind of meeting Casey, asking for his autograph, and fixing up a second meeting with him. She also remembered the match she had been to, reliving how Casey had scored a goal and how everyone had applauded.
Here is the summary of the story, Deep Water, by William Orville Douglas. The story begins with the narrator recounting an incident that took place when he was 10 or 11 years old. The narrator had decided to learn swimming at the YMCA pool in Yakima. He was initially worried when he stepped into the YMCA pool since it stirred unpleasant memories. When he was about 3 or 4 years old, his father had taken him to a beach in California. The waves had knocked him over, and he had been covered by water. This experience had filled him with a deep fear of water. The narrator felt this fear resurfacing at the YMCA pool. But over some days he overcame the fear by observing and imitating the actions of the other boys who were swimming. One day, the narrator was sitting alone by the side of the pool, waiting for the others to turn up. He did not have the confidence to enter the pool alone. A huge boy of 18 came in, picked him up, and threw him into the deep end of the pool. The narrator panicked as he sank to the bottom of the pool, but he kept his wits about him. He decided to push himself up to the surface when his feet hit the bottom and then paddle to the edge of the pool. Unfortunately, he came up slowly. When he opened his eyes, he saw nothing but yellow water. He started to panic as he rose, especially when he could not get his face out of the water. As he sank slowly back down, he started to lose his breath and was suddenly stiff with fear. He reached the bottom and he jumped again, coming up slowly. He was overcome with terror again and froze. He almost came up, but again went back under. Darkness surrounded him as he gave up the struggle to survive, exhausted. That seemed to welcome him, and he lost consciousness. The next thing he knew, he was lying beside the pool, vomiting the water that he had swallowed. He had been pulled out of the water just in time. This incident left him feeling vulnerable and helpless, and from that day he was terrified of water once more. As he grew older, this fear stayed with him and ruined his fishing trips. It prevented him from enjoying simple joys of life like canoeing, boating, and swimming. Finally, he decided to learn swimming from an instructor. He started practicing 5 days a week at a pool. First, he swam repeatedly up and down a pool with a belt that was attached to an overhead rope that the instructor held. He panicked every time he went underwater, but this subsided over 3 months. The instructor then taught him to breathe and kick properly, and eventually he learned to swim without help. The narrator was overjoyed, but wondered if he could swim alone without his instructor's support. He managed just fine. To curb his lingering doubts, he swam alone across Lake Cantwort and across Warm Lake, which he had visited before. He did experience his old fear once in Lake Cantwort, but was able to ignore it. When he was able to swim across Warm Lake and back, he was ecstatic at having conquered his fear. The narrator ends the story by quoting Franklin D. Roosevelt's words, "All we have to fear is fear itself." His near-death experience had only made him stronger. He finally felt liberated. Here is the summary of the poem Aunt Jennifer's Tigers by Adrienne Rich. The poem begins with a vivid description of the tigers that Aunt Jennifer has embroidered on a screen. The tigers are bright and golden yellow against a background of green. They appear alive, almost as though they can move of their own will. As denizens or inhabitants of the green world of forests, they seem to be completely at ease in their surroundings. They are conscious of their power and do not fear anyone, not even man shown under the tree. Like the knights of the Middle Ages, the tigers are chivalric, that is, they are confident and courageous. Thus, Aunt Jennifer's tigers are beautiful animals, assured and confident in their movement, as expressed in the words prance and sleek. In stark contrast to the fearless tigers she has made, Aunt Jennifer's timid and trembling fingers do not seem to have enough strength or confidence to even handle wool. They have trouble pulling the ivory needle she is using, ironically, to create her fearless and spirited tigers. Aunt Jennifer's hand is weighed down by her wedding ring. She is stuck in an unhappy and oppressive marriage, which has restricted her and made it difficult for her to express herself. The poet comments that the relationship is so oppressive that even in death, Aunt Jennifer will not be free from fear. Even in death, Aunt Jennifer will be wearing the ring that marks her lifelong fear of a dominant and cruel husband. The painful experiences of her marriage will continue to encircle her and drag her down. In stark contrast, the tigers that she created will look as strong and spirited as ever. Aunt Jennifer will not survive, but her art will last for eternity. Here is the summary of the lesson, The Enemy, by Pearl S. Buck. The story opens at the house of Dr. Sadao Hoki, a highly successful Japanese surgeon and scientist who had studied medicine in America. Sadao's house was located on the Japanese coast. He lived there with his wife Hannah, their 2 children, and several servants. Sadao and Hannah had met in America but were married with the approval of Sadao's father only after they returned to Japan. One day, from their veranda, the couple saw a man being violently flung to the beach by a wave. They rushed down to help him, afraid that he might be a fisherman in trouble. As they turned him over, however, they realized that he was not Japanese. In fact, he was an American, a prisoner of war who had escaped. Sadao noticed that the man had a bullet wound and was bleeding profusely. While he wondered what should be done, his surgeon's hands seemed to automatically work to stop the bleeding. Sadao and Hannah contemplated throwing him back into the sea. It would be the easy way out, for if they kept him, they would get in trouble for sheltering an American. But if they handed him to the police, he would eventually die. Seeing his state, neither Sadao nor Hannah had the heart to hand him over. Eventually, they carried the man into their house. Once inside, Sadao took a closer look and realized that the man needed to be operated on. Again, they were conflicted. Why operate and save a white man, their enemy? As they mulled over this, they decided to get the man clean first. Sadao left the room and Hannah ordered one of the servants to wash the man. The servant, however, refused to wash a white man. As Hannah reluctantly cleaned the man, Sadao returned carrying his surgeon's emergency bag. He had made up his mind to operate. With Hannah's help, he successfully removed the bullet from the man's back. The man eventually woke up and was frightened when he realized that he was in a Japanese home, but Hannah allayed his fears. Over the next few days, Sadao and Hannah nursed the man, but were otherwise cold towards him. All through, they wondered why they were not able to go to the police. The servants became increasingly worried about Sadao not informing the police about the American. After 7 days, they left the house in protest. Hannah and Sadao bore this stoically. That day, Sadao was summoned to attend to the old ill Japanese army general. Sadao decided to come clean with the general and told him about the soldier. The general could not allow Sadao, the best surgeon in Japan, to be arrested. So he offered to send assassins to kill the white man and dispose of the body. Sadao agreed to the plan. He waited for 3 nights for the assassins, but no one came. Finally, on the 4th day, Sadao decided not to take any further risk. He told the young soldier, who had regained strength by then, to take his boat and row to a little island off the coast. From there, the man could escape on a Korean fishing boat. The young man was reluctant to leave, but he left that night and was never seen again. A week later, after the general recovered from his surgery, the Sadao informed him that the prisoner had escaped. The general confessed that he had forgotten to send the assassins. Afraid of being suspected of treason, he pleaded with Sadao to keep the lapse a secret. Sadao agreed happily. That night, Sadao found himself reflecting on his life in America and the Americans he had met. He had hated bearing the Americans' prejudice. He could not feel thankful even to his American landlady who had taken care of him when he had influenza. Then he remembered the young soldier and pondered on his inability to kill the young white man. Here is the summary of the story, The Last Lesson, by Alfonso Daudet. Franz, the narrator of the story, was running late for school one day and was worried about getting a dressing down from his teacher, Monsieur Hamel. He had not learned the rules of French participles like Monsieur Hamel had asked him to. As Franz hurried to school, he noticed a crowd in front of the village's bulletin board. Since he was already late for school, Franz did not stop to read the news. When he reached school, Franz could not hear the usual bustling sounds heard at the beginning of a school day. The stillness worried Franz even more, as he had hoped to sleep in unnoticed in the commotion. Franz entered the classroom embarrassed and afraid, but was surprised when Monsieur Hamel kindly asked him to take his seat. It was only after he sat down that Franz noticed that Monsieur Hamel was dressed in clothes that he wore only on important days like inspection or prize days. There was a strange solemnness in the air. What surprised Franz even more was the sight of the villagers occupying the backbenches that would otherwise be empty. As Franz wondered what was happening, Monsieur Hamel informed them in a grave tone that this would be their last French lesson. Since Germany took over Alsace and Lorraine after the war, it had been ordered that only German would be taught in schools now. Franz was shocked by the announcement and realized why the atmosphere was so serious that day. He was filled with regret and wished that he had paid more attention to his studies instead of fooling around. His books no longer felt like a nuisance, and he realized that he would miss the cranky old Monsieur Hamel. Then he heard his name being called out for recitation. Completely unprepared, Franz made several errors as soon as he began, and stood there feeling terribly ashamed. Again, instead of scolding Franz, Monsieur Hamel spoke about the general tendency in the village to put off learning. The Prussians could now mock them for not knowing to speak and write their own language. Monsieur Hamel went on to say how it was not just Franz's fault. Franz's parents were guilty too, for they preferred that he work on a farm or at a mill than attend school. Monsieur Hamel confessed that he himself acted irresponsibly when he gave students holidays so that he himself could go fishing. Monsieur Hamel then spoke about how French was the most clear and logical language and how they must guard the language. By doing so, they would have retained at least one part of their freedom. While they continued with the lessons for the day, Franz found himself paying attention to every word that Monsieur Hamel uttered that day. Monsieur Hamel too taught with a zeal like never before. At one point, Franz looked up from his work and saw Monsieur Hamel gazing at everything as if he was trying to make a mental photograph of everything that he could see. It was a deeply emotional moment for Monsieur Hamel to leave behind 40 years of hard work. Even the villagers seemed to be overcome with emotion. Finally, when the lesson ended, Monsieur Hamel stood up to speak, but words were stuck in his throat. He only managed to write Vive la France on the blackboard and dismissed the class with a wave of his hand. Here is the summary of the lesson, The Enemy, by Pearl S. Buck. The story opens at the house of Dr. Sadao Hoki, a highly successful Japanese surgeon and scientist who had studied medicine in America. Sadao's house was located on the Japanese coast. He lived there with his wife Hannah, their two children, and several servants. Sadao and Hannah had met in America but were married with the approval of Sadao's father only after they returned to Japan. One day, from their veranda, the couple saw a man being violently flung to the beach by a wave. They rushed down to help him, afraid that he might be a fisherman in trouble. As they turned him over, however, they realized that he was not Japanese. In fact, he was an American, a prisoner of war who had escaped. Sadao noticed that the man had a bullet wound and was bleeding profusely. While he wondered what should be done, his surgeon's hands seemed to automatically work to stop the bleeding. Sadao and Hannah contemplated throwing him back into the sea. It would be the easy way out, for if they kept him, they would get in trouble for sheltering an American. But if they handed him to the police, he would eventually die. Seeing his state, neither Sadao nor Hannah had the heart to hand him over. Eventually, they carried the man into their house. Once inside, Sadao took a closer look and realized that the man needed to be operated on. Again, they were conflicted. Why operate and save a white man, their enemy? As they mulled over this, they decided to get the man clean first. Sadao left the room and Hannah ordered one of the servants to wash the man. The servant, however, refused to wash a white man. As Hannah reluctantly cleaned the man, Sadao returned carrying his surgeon's emergency bag. He had made up his mind to operate. With Hannah's help, he successfully removed the bullet from the man's back. The man eventually woke up and was frightened when he realized that he was in a Japanese home, but Hannah allayed his fears. Over the next few days, Sadao and Hannah nursed the man, but were otherwise cold towards him. All through, they wondered why they were not able to go to the police. The servants became increasingly worried about Sadao not informing the police about the American. After 7 days, they left the house in protest. Hannah and Sadao bore this stoically. That day, Sadao was summoned to attend to the old ill Japanese army general. Sadao decided to come clean with the general and told him about the soldier. The general could not allow Sadao, the best surgeon in Japan, to be arrested. So he offered to send assassins to kill the white man and dispose of the body. Sadao agreed to the plan. He waited for 3 nights for the assassins, but no one came. Finally, on the 4th day, Sadao decided not to take any further risk. He told a young soldier, who had regained strength by then, to take his boat and row to a little island off the coast. From there, the man could escape on a Korean fishing boat. The young man was reluctant to leave, but he left that night and was never seen again. A week later, after the general recovered from his surgery, the Sadao informed him that the prisoner had escaped. The general confessed that he had forgotten to send the assassins. Afraid of being suspected of treason, he pleaded with Sadao to keep the lapse a secret. Sadao agreed happily. That night, Sadao found himself reflecting on his life in America and the Americans he had met. He had hated bearing the Americans' prejudice. He could not feel thankful even to his American landlady who had taken care of him when he had influenza. Then he remembered the young soldier and pondered on his inability to kill the young white man. Here is the summary of the story, The Third Level by Jack Finney. Charlie, 31 years old, claims that there exists a third level in the Grand Central Station, even though presidents of major railroads in New York deny its existence. When he consulted a psychiatrist, the psychiatrist, to the annoyance of Charlie's wife, concluded that Charlie was unhappy. The psychiatrist, whose name was Sam, believed that for Charlie the third level was a medium of escape from the world. Charlie's friends concurred with the doctor, using his hobby of stamp collecting as proof. Charlie, however, disagreed. He states that his current stamp book is an inheritance from his grandfather, who, living in a peaceful time, did not require any escape from reality. He then narrates his experience at the Grand Central Station. One summer evening, while traveling home, he got lost in the Grand Central Station. He walked down 2 levels just like everyone else. Then he found himself in a corridor which seemed different to the others. Quite unexpectedly, he came upon the third level. This level was lit by flickering gas lights and had brass bowls on the floor. He also saw people dressed in 1890 clothing. He also spotted a Currier and Ives locomotive. To make sure he was in the right century, he looked for copies of the newspaper The World. The paper was dated June 11, 1894. It confirmed that he had traveled back in time. The author was excited. 1894 was a peaceful time before the 2 world wars. The author longed to live in simpler times, untouched by the ravages of wars. So, immediately he decided to buy 2 tickets for himself and his wife Louisa. He wanted to travel to Galesburg, Illinois. However, at the counter, the clerk refused to accept his modern currency and threatened to call the police. Charlie, to avoid being imprisoned, ran away and soon found a way back to the present. The next day, Charlie withdrew nearly all their savings and purchased old-style currency. But he never found a way to the third level again. His wife, worried about him, asked him not to seek the third level again. This was before they learned about Sam's disappearance. Soon after, Charlie made a surprising discovery. On one night, while looking at his stamp collection, he found a stamp cover dated from 1894. Usually, when a new stamp is issued, stamp collectors mail the stamp to themselves to mark the date of issue. Someone had mailed the stamp from 1894 to his grandfather. Charlie, on opening the envelope, was surprised to discover a letter from Sam. In the letter, Sam informs Charlie that he found the third level and had been living in Galesburg for 2 weeks. He urges Charlie not to lose hope and to continue looking for the third level.
Let us see the summary of the lesson, Journey to the End of the Earth by Tishani Doshi. The author, after 100 hours of traveling by car, aeroplane and ship, arrived at the coldest continent of the world, Antarctica. She felt immense wonder looking at Antarctica's white landscape for the first time. She also marveled at the fact that India and Antarctica were part of the same landmass once. 650 million years ago, Earth had one giant supercontinent named Gondwana. Gondwana was home to a variety of flora and fauna. The climate was also much warmer. Then, after 500 million years, Gondwana was separated into several countries. Antarctica is one of the few places which remains the closest to the geological composition of Gondwana. So, to visit Antarctica is to see that history also understands the future of the Earth. The author used to Indian summers filled disoriented by Antarctica's frigid and desolate climate. It also makes her think about the position of humans in the larger context of Earth's geological history. Though humans have been around for just 12,000 years, they have taken over Earth's resources and irretrievably changed Earth's natural balance. Climate change is a result of this takeover. To understand various climate changes that happen around the world, one can study half million year old carbon records trapped in Antarctica's ice. The author then talks about students on ice program started by Geoff Green. Green had become tired of carrying celebrities and rich voyagers. So, he founded the program to create a generation of future policy makers by showing them the South Pole. The author believes that this program has been successful because it was impossible not to be affected by the South Pole. It is at Antarctica that you can see how the little things changes can have big repercussions. She gives the example of tiny phytoplankton which nourish the southern sea's entire food chain. The author experienced something similar when her ship was stuck between ice. The ship of the captain made them gear up and experience a walk on the ice. While on ice, the author saw the layer of ice giving away to water. There were seals bathing themselves under the sun. At that time, the author realized that everything is connected together. Now, the author muses on the beauty of balance that underlies the life of planet Earth. She wonders what would happen to the Earth if Antarctica became a warmer place, if humans would become extinct like dinosaurs. However, spending 2 weeks with idealistic teenagers, the author feels optimistic about the future. Let us see the summary of the poem, A Roadside Stand by Robert Frost. Frost talks about a little roadside stand by the country road. It is an extension of a little old house with a new shed. It stands at the edge of the road hoping, not for bread, but for a little money. The stand, symbolic of the light of the poor, needs the money that goes to make the city richer and better. The people from the city usually pass by this stand without stopping. If they do stop, then it is to complain about the paint or the signs. They are also unimpressed by the wild berries or the golden squash or the charming country scene. Angry at their reactions, Frost tells them to walk away if they cannot spend some money here. Because that's what the people in the roadside stand need, some money from the city. It might help them lead a better life, just like the movies promised. Frost believes it's the political party in power that is stopping them from having a better life. These people relocate these people from the city with the promise of benefits and benevolence. Frost feels disgusted by their intention where they feed on poor people's dreams rather than genuinely help them feel better. Now, these people wait for a passing car. Frost is scornful of their longing, which he thinks is childish. They pray for at least one of them to stop, if only to ask about the farmers' prices. Some did stop, but only to turn or to buy gas. There is no hope in the country. Frost says that he would feel relief if these people were put out of their misery. And thinking that, he wants that someone to come to him and to make a similar offer too. Thank you. Let us see the summary of the story, The Tiger King by Kalki. The story begins with the narrator introducing the readers to the late Maharaja of Pratibandhapuram, popularly known as the Tiger King. The Maharaja, we are told, met his end in an extraordinary manner. When the king was born, the chief astrologer predicted that he would grow up to become a hero and a mighty warrior, but that he would eventually die. To everybody's astonishment, the 10-year-old prince started to speak. He brushed aside the prediction. Everyone dies eventually, he remarked, and demanded to know how he would die. The chief astrologer told the prince that a tiger would cause his death. The infant prince, however, was least affected by this. Once the prince turned 20, he became the Maharaja. Soon he became aware of the prediction made at his birth. The young king resolved to hunt a tiger to prove the prediction false. After killing the first tiger, he triumphantly sent for the astrologer. The astrologer declared that the Maharaja would kill 99 tigers but should beware the 100th tiger. From then, tiger hunting was prohibited in Pratibandhapuram for everyone but the Maharaja. The Maharaja was fearless on his hunts and even killed a few tigers with his bare hands. However, he neglected all his kingly duties in his obsession to prove the astrologer wrong. So obsessed was he that he nearly lost his throne when he did not allow even a high-ranking British officer to hunt the tigers. Finally, a gift worth 3 lakh rupees was sent to the officer's wife, and that saved his throne. In 10 years, the Maharaja killed 70 tigers. He could kill no more as he had wiped out the entire tiger population of his region. To continue his mission, he married a princess from a state that had a large tiger population. Every time he visited his father-in-law, he would shoot 5 to 6 tigers, and soon he killed 99 tigers. Now it became impossible to locate even a single tiger anywhere, and the Maharaja became gloomy and temperamental. News of a tiger near a hillside village turned out to be baseless. The angry Maharaja ordered his Diwan to double the taxes. The Diwan, fearing a mutiny and the prospect of losing his job, decided to do something. He had an elderly tiger that had been smuggled in from the Madras Zoo. He took it to the forest where the Maharaja was hunting and left it there. The Maharaja found the tiger and was overjoyed. He took aim and shot at its 100th innocent target. His joy knew no bounds at his win over destiny, and he ordered that the dead beast be brought to the town for a procession. Once the Maharaja left, the hunters with the Maharaja realized that the beast was not dead. The Maharaja had missed his mark, and the animal had only fainted. One of those hunters then shot the tiger, and it was paraded to the town as per the Maharaja's wishes. The Maharaja, now content, started paying attention to his family. He hunted for a gift for his son's 3rd birthday and decided to buy a wooden tiger he saw in a toy shop, an ideal gift in his opinion. When the Maharaja and his son were playing with the wooden tiger, a tiny piece of the wood pierced the Maharaja's hand. The wound caused an infection that spread all over the Maharaja's arm. 3 surgeons operated on him, but in vain. Thus, the Tiger King was eventually brought down by the 100th tiger, a mere wooden child's toy. Thank you.
Here is the summary of the story, The Rat Trap. Once there was a tramp who made and sold small wire rat traps. Selling rat traps, however, was not profitable, and so he also stole to have enough to eat and stay alive. One day, a thought crossed his mind that the world was little more than a bait set to draw people to their own destruction. The tramp, who had always been ill-treated by the world, found great amusement in this thought. One evening, the tramp knocked on the door of a little cottage, hoping for a chance to rest for the night. The lonely crofter who lived there welcomed the tramp, offering him a hot meal and tobacco. They spent the evening talking and playing measles, a card game. The crofter confided in the tramp about how he earned money and where he kept it. The next morning, the tramp and the crofter left the house together. The tramp bade farewell and went his way, only to return half an hour later. He smashed a window pane and stole the crofter's money. Smug and with his pocket full of money, the tramp decided to walk through the forest to avoid being caught. His joy, however, was short-lived, as he got lost in the forest. As he wandered in the forest looking for a way out, he realized that he too had allowed himself to be fooled by bait. Darkness fell, and the tramp sank to the ground in despair. Just then, he heard the sound of hammer strokes from a nearby iron mill and stumbled in the direction of the sound. He reached Ramses' ironworks and asked the mastersmith for a night shelter. The blacksmith, used to such requests, nodded his agreement after a casual and indifferent glance at the tramp. Later that night, the owner of the mill, the iron master, arrived at the factory for his nightly inspection. He mistook the tramp for an old acquaintance from the army. The tramp, hoping to extract some cash from the iron master, thought it wise not to reveal his true identity. Things, though, got somewhat unpleasant for the tramp, as the iron master insisted on taking him home, which the tramp flatly refused. The iron master gave in then, but sent his daughter Edla to persuade the tramp. Edla's friendly manner caused the tramp to change his mind, and he went with her. At the house, the tramp was given a haircut, shave, bath, and a pair of freshly pressed clothes. The iron master looked at the clean tramp and realized his mistake. He wanted to call the sheriff, but finally refrained from it after the tramp convinced him that the world is a rat trap, and the iron master himself might get one day ensnared in the trap. The iron master, though amused, asked the tramp to leave at once. However, Edla convinced her father to let the poor tramp spend Christmas with them. The tramp spent Christmas Eve doing little else other than eating and sleeping. The next day, at church, the iron master and Edla came to know that the tramp had stolen 30 kroner from the poor crofter. Fearing the worst, father and daughter returned home only to find the tramp gone. He had left a rat trap and a letter for the girl. In the rat trap were the 3 10-kroner notes of the crofter. In the note, the tramp expressed his desire to reciprocate Edla's kindness and asked her to return the money to the poor crofter. He also said that the rat trap was a Christmas present for her. Because she treated him as if he were a real captain, he was able to escape the world's rat trap.